Firstly, thank you to all of you that are attending our Build, Boost and Benefit Masterclass on Granny Flat Construction. I'd like to welcome you all here and thank you for attending. I'd also like to welcome all our online guests that are joining us from the East Coast and anywhere else around Australia, and all those people that will join us in the future through the benefit of our video links. So I'm sure there'll be many people that will benefit. I'd like to thank the staff as well for helping get this ready and for attending. I would also like to thank the array of speakers that are here. The quality is absolutely excellent. We've dealt with a lot of the people ourselves independently, and I can't vouch for them enough. So I think you're pretty lucky to get them to speak to you for about 10-15 minutes each. So we'll kick off at 6:30. We'll finish at precisely 7:30. Then you can mingle. Some housekeeping. If you go out that door and just go through the next doors aside, you've got the toilet block there as well. You've got food and drinks. If you need any water or any drinks during the interim, please help yourself. Our first speaker is going to be Peter Ing from Par Consult. We're using him personally for something at the moment, and I've known him for 15 years. He's a wonderful town planner and architect, and I hope you get a lot out of what he has to say. The second will be Nick Souros from Sunset Constructions, and Nick is currently doing some granny flat construction for some of our properties and has an in-depth knowledge. The third speaker will be Raveen Lienegay, a co-director at Porter Matthews Metro, and he'll give you a live case example of a granny flat construction that he's helped with now, so you can get the benefit of that. Our next speaker from there will be Adi Desai from Ardent Accounting Advisory Services, and he's a wonderful accountant. Lots of tax experience and great at helping small businesses such as ours. And then Guyan will finish us off with with any financing needs. Nothing can happen without finance, so he's your person to speak to. Hopefully you get to meet all these people and you enjoy the seminar. If you've got any questions, I'd ask you that maybe you write them down, jot them down as you go. And if you want to approach any of the people or us, please do so. And I've forgotten one person, which is very important. Melanie Quadros from Porter Matthews Metro will tell us a little bit about our own service, okay? That's an important thing as well. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not good at public speaking, so excuse me. I know a lot in my head, but I'll try and to be clear and to be as succinct as possible. As you know, my name is Peter. I'm from Par Property Development Consultant. My role today is to walk you through the planning process or the planning requirements for Granny Flat for 4 key council area, which are Belmont, City of Belmont, City of Canning, Armadale, and Kalamanda. So those are the 4 key areas. But having said that, there are different council with different requirements. More than happy to ask any question, speak to me that on. All right, so slide 1. So why planning really matters? As you all know, planning rules can be quite stringent. It will make or break any development, regardless of the size. Sometimes it just can be quite, the red tape, I must say, can be quite, how would I say, quite strenuous, that you need to go through the process. And the main thing is not all council apply the same rules the same way. If you want to get it right, you have to get the planning and design early in the stage, so that will help you to get the whole process going smoothly. Okay, let's move on to slide 2. As we all know, across WA, the baseline of rules, which we call is the residential design codes, or commonly known as R codes. The purpose of the R codes is to provide a comprehensive basis and guidance and control for residential development throughout WA. State government recently changed the cost requirement, especially for ancillary dwellings, to provide greater housing diversity, more affordable housing options, and to support for our aging population. This means that you build granny flat on your property for your relative, your friends, or you can even rent it out. So, which I'm sure you guys can mention that later on. So, what is ancillary dwelling, or we commonly known as granny flat? So, granny flat is essentially is a self-contained dwelling on the same site as the existing home. It may be attached to, or it can be independent of each other, but within the same property. So, what are the key changes based on the RCOS 2024? The key changes that I have highlighted is the maximum size of 70 square meter for the internal floor area. That excludes garage. So if you combine with the garage, you're looking at potentially up to more than 100 square meter of building size, which is quite reasonable. What else? The other key changes is there's a removal of 300 square meter of minimum lot size. Previously, in the previous R codes, you need to have a minimum size of 350 to be able to build a granny flat. They've taken that out, which is good, which means that simple group dwellings, a single house or a strata lot be able to build granny flat within the property, provided you have enough land to comply with the RCOS requirement. The other key requirement is that car parking is no longer required for an area that's within location A. What I mean by location A is that if the property is within 800 meter of distance to a train station or within 250 meter to high frequency bus route, which means that then you don't need to provide any car parking. For myself personally as a designer, I think it is good to provide at least one additional car parking for resale value in the future, but this is all based on individual preference. All right. So just a quick comparison across the four cities between city of Belmont, Canning, Armadale, and Kalamanda. So for city of Belmont, you are allowed to have up to 100 square meter of internal floor area, which is quite generous. Where city of Canning, Armadale, and Kalamanda, they are more restricted to 70 square meter. For Kalamanda itself, if it's zoned as what's it called? Kalamanda. Rural, you can go up to 100 square meter purely because rural area is considered like an agricultural land, which means you have a bigger land size, you can have a bigger granny flat. So a normal residential area is up to 70 square meter. Car parking requirement, I did say that it's only one bay, but it all depends on the location of the site. So it's very site specific. Other requirement for city of Belmont, because it's a split code, let's say there's a flexible coding in place for that property, then that need to be assessed accordingly. Or if it's within the perth noise area, or is within the railway or highway area, which will require additional planning requirement. For example, additional insulation or a quiet noise house package design. For places like Armadale or Kalamanda, is within the bushfire prone area, your building needs to be upgraded to be more fire resistant to bushfire. So that will impact on the construction cost as well. All right, we move on to the common pitfalls. The common pitfalls that from my experience, is not checking the zoning and the density coding, which means that, for example, let's say a property is zoned as R20, you have a different requirement of setbacks, open space requirement. So that's very important when you look at potentially include a granny flat within the property. The other common pitfalls that I find is sometimes we are over providing in the design, which means that you're providing more than what is required within the property, which is unnecessary, and you compromise the layout of the house. So in certain area, to me personally, it's worth to go through the planning process to try to justify and maximize the building area so that you can have a better design outcome than having a standard compliant building. That's my opinion anyway. All right. Fourth is, all right, so the other pitfall is sometimes having worked with local government for 7 years, we need to look at what's within the property and what's outside the property as well. For example, it could be existing verge tree or existing power pole that is along the verge, which may impact the design of the property, which needs to be taken into consideration early in the stage, not when when you complete the whole design, and then that's where council will say, "Oh, sorry, you need to change the design because the driveway is in the way of existing tree and things like that." So that, to me, is one of the few occurrences I've seen in my years as a planning officer in local government, where applicants are more reluctant to change because they're going through the time and money to design to that stage, and it's always very hard to go back to square one to the drawing board again. All right, so how can I help? At PAR, my focus is to help property owners or agents to navigate through the process smoothly, which means by looking at the property specifically in that area and come up with potential feasibility studies. Or as an architect as well, I can assist in coming up with the design and assist you through the development application all the way to get planning approval. Yeah, that's what I can do. To wrap up, first thing I will say is to do your homework early, check your zoning in that area. Always remember every site is unique and every council has different local planning scheme and policy, which you need to go through very closely before you make the initial design decision. Yeah, that's it. That's it from my side. Thank you for your time.
Hello, everybody. My name's Nick, and I'm from Sunset Construction. And I've been in the industry for 20 years. I'm a builder and registered for the last 10. And at the moment, I must say, Granny Flats are our biggest target. We've just got so much influx of it. Everybody's just building them, which makes sense. Half of my speech, I think Peter's already covered it, which is pretty good. Everyone's question is basically what Peter covered. I'm just going to go through a few points now and just go through it as best I can. Please bear with me. One, I'm not a very good public speaker and I have got an infection. So if I stutter, you understand why. The three targets that people ring up for a Granny Flat are basically investors that want to put something on the back for extra income. Owners are putting on Granny Flats because they're downsizing. So they're either moving in the back themselves or the children coming in. And the other one is putting in a retreat or a studio on the property. With the process, it's obviously like every other construction that we build. It's slab on ground, frame, lock up, fit out and handover. There's nothing different from any other construction that you build on any other house. The good thing about the Granny Flats is we knock them off in about 3 to 4 months. So it's a quick turnaround. They're fast and they're quick, and that's one thing that we like as builders, to get in and get out. With the process, I might just add, obviously we're investors here. With something you need to keep in mind is if it's going to be rented out, can you build with your tenant still in there? 9 out of 10 times we've had that we wait for the tenant to move out and then we go in and do the Granny Flat. But at the same token, we do it within 3 to 4 months so you as investors don't lose out on time and money as a rental. So same again with a building permit. It's a DA because it's under 70 square metres, which goes to council within 10 days of submission. You've got your building permit, so you can get started straight away. So obviously you get in with the design and the architect, which is a key factor when doing a Granny Flat, only because we've got clients where they've got the plot of land that it can be done, but obviously it has to be done in an L shape or a T shape to go around a house. So that's something that as a builder we go on site and check with the clients to see that it can be done. So that's one thing you have to do. And the engineers, we've found a lot of properties, especially Maddington Way, that the soak wells. So that's an extra added cost to you building of a Granny Flat. Site works is a big cost where it's unknown with a Granny Flat because we've got to find access. So with access, you got to get a bobcat to go at the back of a property to level the property, and access for all the rest of the trades to come and do their work. So when it comes to costings, and everybody asks what does a Granny Flat cost, it varies on those things. Not only that, it comes up to your finishes and your floor layout. If it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, at the moment we're doing a 3x1, which is pretty good, and I think for an investment property hits all the targets. With costs as well, it's just not that. It's landscaping, fencing, carport and driveway. Obviously you want all that done before as an investor, so you have immediately hand keys over to the real estate agent and rent it out. With the contracts, obviously, we can do cost plus and fixed, but 9 out of 10 times it is fixed contract regarding on the building. We have done a couple on cost plus, only because we knew them and they are in the trade industry, and it made it a lot easier for them to get through to council. When it comes to the formula, yet again, that depends on your finishes. There is a square metre rate that everybody talks about, but it all depends on what you're after and what you're finishing. At the same token, you've still got retaining walls, stormwater, and carports and upgrades. So that all adds up to your Granny Flat when you put that into perspective. Plus bow zoning. Bow zoning is another thing that is a big cost, depending on where it is and what area. So we noticed that we had to spend a lot more money for the client, even though we priced the job up. At one stage, it blew out because it was in the bow zone. That's just a few things to consider with your costings. So with the insights on recent builds, it comes down to your setbacks, as Peter talked about, your setbacks, privacy, your services, your fencing, and all the other things that come into the insights. So with the project, it comes up to projects, lock-up stage and for build. Yeah, but that's basically the main thing which Peter covered was your DAs and so forth with that side of things. If we can go to the next one. Obviously everybody knows about the building options. We've got double brick veneer, timber stud frame and modular prefab. We don't do modular prefab, but it's fast and quick and it's a lot faster process. Key checkpoints and facts. Engage a surveyor early. Speak to Peter. That's all I can say. DA and PA. You develop approval in your business and your building permits. Speak to your council and get as much information as you can. That's about it. Is there any other questions I can answer? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering what sort of, obviously after the site costs, what sort of costs are you looking at per square metre for a Granny Flat?
The golden rule is it's hard. So we say stick to 3,000 square metre. So on average, a 70 square metre one is about 210,000. Overall, we worked it out to about 250. Yeah, so that just gives you yeah. So we've got an investment property now in Carmelo. So that's a 3x1, and that came to 255 turnkey. Yeah.
What would be the cheapest option? That's double weekend.
We don't do the modular, but the prefab will be your trusses cladded on the outside, gyprock on the inside. That's about 255. Double brick is probably about another $8,000. We noticed because it's a lot more wet trades and it's a little bit slower. That's what we noticed. Everyone's double brick in WA. Yeah.
Alternative options like cool room panel?
Yep. We've got one lined up. That's in High Wycombe. We're doing it out of EPS. That was the cheapest out of a lot. It cost us a little bit more. EPS is your cool room panel. So I think that was 100 mil by council. And that's the quickest and the fastest way you can do it. But
maybe we might just continue on. Maybe if you at the end of the seminar, I think you'll approach any of the individuals with questions. I'm sure people got heaps of questions for you specifically, Nick, and for you, Peter, on a bit more in-depth analysis. So we're going to you. You get in and hold your questions. Yeah, we're here for another half an hour.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Raveen. I'm one of the sales directors. I'm going to go through one of the case studies that we've recently sold that I helped them to buy, and our lovely property management team looking after it now. And yeah, they're going through the process of doing a granny flat. So we'll have a look. If you can get me the first slide. This is a property that I sold back in 2024 in February. I sold this with a buyer's agent from Sydney. The client bought the property for $555,000, a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom home. It was one of the old houses, extended. I've sold this twice. This is the second time I sold it. So they had a lovely extension, but one of those old 3x1s. The previous owners, they've been smart, and they've added another bedroom and a bathroom on the extension. So which is a 4x2. Well, Mel done a really good job and got a massive rent for it when I back then. So I think you got about $750 a week back then, and it's currently rented out for $700 a week. Again, when the clients bought it, even at now, like you can see, it's 156 square meter footprint, returning about $700 a week, which is about 6.5% yield, gross yield, which is really good. Like even if you're buying a property under commercial terms, like anything above 6%, that's the rule of thumb. They're saying, anything above 6%, you're doing really well. So that is, at that price, they're returning 6.5%. But then I remember the client got in contact with us a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, and then they said they're looking at putting a granny flat at the back. And their strategy was not to flip the property, because as investors, what we find is some investors here to ride the market on the curve, and they try to offload it, get their money quickly, and get out. But these investors are more long-term investors, so they're here for long-term hold, and they wanted something. And one other thing is that this is a standard R17.5, which is single residential. So you can't do a subdivision. So you can do only a single residential property there. So, but they wanted to maximize the yield by putting another dwelling there. So obviously the granny flat option is very attractive to make two incomes. So that's the main reason they wanted to look at it. So they went through the strategy of, the whole granny flat process. So I remember they rang me initially and they said, Raveen, what do you think of the area? Is there any potential for the granny flats? That's when, I think in 2023, because we were not very familiar with granny flats in WA market. Because we've been selling for David's been selling for 30 years, but it's not that many granny flats that we've seen. But it's only with that Sydney investors coming in and they saw that potential here. And obviously we went through our housing crisis. They wanted more properties. So the granny flats it has become a very popular one, but those Sydney investors knew from back then that it's going to be popular. So anyway, so these guys, when they approached me, they said, we're going to be planning to hold on to the property for long term, and what sort of a granny flat that we should design. So as Peter was saying, if you are holding the property for long term, you need to maximize the plot size. Because the easiest way is to put a 70 square meter granny flat, which is going to save you 3 months in your planning approvals, but you're not maximizing the site coverage. So, but these guys went through the full. They went above. I think that was about 80 square meter granny flat. And they went through double brick and tile. So this is what you got to think of, like when you are deciding how you're going to do it. If your plans are long term, you need to plan to maximize the size of the granny flat, and maybe extra 10 square meters, maybe another room. That'll be like another $50 or $80 more per week rent for you. And over time, if you're holding it for 10 years, that's a lot of money. And that, when you're planning. So anyway, so these have given a 12 to 18 months time frame with Summit Homes to build. And I think that's quite a long time, isn't it? Yeah. And but there are some risks that they have gone through. Obviously, costs are likely to go over, and the valuations, Guyane will go through the valuations. But I think at that time, obviously, because there wasn't many granny flat sales, there wasn't any sales evidence to back up valuations. But it's all sorted now. But I'll go through the next slide, please. The building spec of 23 Stage Street, granny flat, they've done with Summit Homes. It's a double brick and tile. That the timeline was to start in November 2024 and finish it by 2026 March. All the inclusions, backyard demolition, sub-metering, that is something that you got to know. Like when you putting a granny flat, you need to have separate electric counters, water counters and such. I think you'll have electric meters, separately. Driveways, dividing fences, air conditioning, and all that stuff. Couple of roadblocks these investors had to go through is earthwork court has come up more when they start digging in. There was a underneath old swimming pool. Even I didn't know that. So hopefully, like in Maddington, nothing else come out of there. And they just found a little bit of asbestos. It was about extra $15,000 to remove that stuff. Next slide. So if you can see there, that's the site plan. So it got the front house, nice driveway to the side, and it goes in an L shape. And the granny flat, this one got 3 bedrooms. So if they did that 70 square meter one, they would have had only 1 or 1.5 bedrooms sort of thing. But this one got 3 bedrooms that has given that maximum capacity to rent for higher price. And here is the financial breakdown. So the purchase price is $550,000. Stamp duty back then was $21,000. So they have paid a buyer's agent $22,000 to acquire the property. Granny flat cost, including site works, everything was $275,000. So it has costed them $873,000 as the full cost for the granny flat and the house. Currently, main dwelling, our property managers, they got at $700 a week, and that 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom at the back, a double brick and tile, really nicely finished, brand new, would fetch about $650 a week. So pretty much, financially, you are increasing your yield from 6% to 8%. That's what you're doing. And over time, like when you're holding it for long term, the returns are there, like for you to do whatever your investment journey that what you want to go to. After the bill, there are 2 recent sales. If you can flick to the other one, please. So this is a property just went under contract around for 1.1 million in Maddington. It's again for granny flats. Currently, a house with a granny flat will have more interest in that high 900s to $1 million mark. But this one here was finished really nice, but the property was sold it to not an investor. It was gone to a local owner occupier, and they have paid 1.1 million for that. But again, that granny flat there, if you see, that's only a 1-bedroom granny flat. So the next one in Keston Place, Gossos, one of my clients did this one. So they, this is sold for $990 in September last year. So the price has gone up now. Like we're achieving, I don't know, even the last few months, we're achieving about 10% more in some areas, some properties we're selling. So they, it's definitely, when it comes to the valuations, there are sales evidence now in the area that'll back up in that 1 million to 1.1 million mark. This particular one, he was very smart, the guy who did it. He had the front house separately rented, and he had the granny flat built. And this is not complies with the your stuff, Peter, I think, but he had that little studio rented out separately. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, so this is what's happening out there. Like if you're looking at doing a granny flat, there's definitely a better option to create your extra income. And thank you.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for everyone for coming. I'm here to let you know how to benefit from your granny flat, from the reward that you'll get as a financial basis through leasing through us, your beautiful Porter Matthews Metro property management team, which sit here today. Woo! You've been explained a few bit of information on how to build and boost, and now the benefit comes through. So these are live examples that we have on the screen at the moment from granny flats that are in our rent roll that we have helped 2 ways. I've had investors call me and say, we've got a granny flat, we've got a property, and it's privately leased at the moment. We've gone in, organised all the compliance for the main residence, but also the granny flat to make sure that all ticks all the boxes. And these are some live examples. So you can see typically 1-by-1s, whether they're in Maddington or out in Kalamunda, for instance, you're getting about $350 to $400 per week. 2-by-1s, we're into that sort of $400 range. And then anything bigger than that, a 2-by-2 or a 3-by-1 or a 3-by-2, then we skip into the 500s, up to $600 a week, which inevitably with your main residence, you'll be looking at about $1,000, if not more, per week in rental income. Live examples here. Next one. Yep. These are currently on the market. And again, it just comes back to 3 things. The size of the granny flat, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 2-bathroom. Also, whether there's sub-meters, it's a massive thing, which I'll touch on in a sec. but also the separation of that granny flat and the main residence as well, which is very, very important. The more private the granny flat is, the more rental income we will achieve. For the reason being, it's private. People don't feel like they're living with that main residence at the front. Something I will touch on as well, our team are amazing at linking two types of tenants. Because even though you've got your front beautiful home, might be a 3x2, and then you've got your little granny flat at the back, and there's a fence line, it's all very nice and separate, inevitably they're living on one site. They have to get along. They're sharing a driveway. They might be sharing parking. And our experienced, award-winning property management team know how to beautifully lease and link two families or a family and a FIFO worker to be able to live on one site in harmony, you might say. So that's why we have been leaders in this facet of leasing and management as well. So if you are looking at building a granny flat, please contact us to manage it because we do it right. And there's a lot of agencies that don't do it as well as what you deserve and what we can do. All right, legislation. Lauren's all about legislation. So Lauren's our head of department and she's amazing to make sure that there's no risk on you as an owner, that the staff are covered, and it all comes back to the RTA and legislation. So sub-meters, massive thing. Some of the investors that I've dealt with over the last few years who have had a granny flat, there's been no sub-meters. It's a very important thing to have. If you're building from the start, fresh, have it all in your planning through council and so forth, so it's all there. If you do have a granny flat or you know a friend or family that has a granny flat and wants to lease it and it isn't sub-metered, get them to call us because we can help them go through the process of installing those sub-meters to make sure that the legislation is met. Whilst that process is happening, where we're helping them with that, there is a way, though, that we can charge the tenants usage for the utilities during that time period. But it's always advisable to inevitably have that property on sub-meters. Very important. All right, and just touching on our property management team. If you are wanting, which you deserve, the best return, the best yield for your property being a dual site property, then our team are here to provide that for you. We have always hit record prices with leasing. We continue to do so, and it's not just because we know the market and we do what's necessary to get that price, but we get you a good tenant. And under these circumstances, it's not just a 4x2 in the back of Belmont and a family goes in case Sarah. It is bringing two people, two families together in harmony to make sure that they live well, they look after the property, the condition of the properties are well met, and then you benefit in the long run. That's it from me. Who's up next? Addy.
Thanks, Mel. Good evening, everyone. My name is Addy Desai. I've been asked to speak about the dark side today, which is what the taxman wants to see with this new build. Before we dive in, there's a big disclaimer. I don't know any of your personal circumstances, so this is just generic advice, and this is not specific to you. So please speak to your accountant or your tax advisor to know what specifically applies to you guys. One of the things is that I'd like to say is nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So if you look around you, the Potter Matthews Metro team is here presenting and talking to you guys about this, is them showing that they care about your returns, your investment. And them calling the experts to cover the topics is them saying there are bits of pieces that we don't know about. We rely on experts to come and tell you about that. So kudos to the Potter Matthews Metro team for that. The key issues I'm going to talk about is what happens to the tax consequences when you have a granny flat. There are two kinds of arrangements. I'm not going to go into the non-commercial arrangement. A non-commercial arrangement is where you could have a family member give you $250,000 and get a lifetime lease on a granny flat. I'm not going to cover any of those topics because they're non-commercial. They have a different set of tax rules, and they're not really investor driven. They're more lifestyle, where aging parent wants to live with their children and so on and so forth. Let's assume at commercial granny flats where the aim is either we're going to lease it out to arm's length tenants. And if that is the case, first question, can you claim interest on the money borrowed to build the granny flat? If you had to go borrow money, can you claim that as a tax deduction? The short answer is yes. Mindful that it can only be claimed once the granny flat is available for rent, not during the construction phase. Can you claim part of the rates and council charges as a deduction? The answer to that is again, yes. Can you claim electricity and water usage? Mel and the team have covered this very clearly. You can only on charge if you've got a sub-meter. So it is important that you get the sub-meter sorted quite early on in the piece. Can you claim Div 43 deductions? Div 43 deduction stands for the capital allowance that you get on a property. It's usually 2.5%. Most investors love Div 43. The reason, because it's a non-cash deduction. What that really means is that you can write off this amount from your return without having to actually spend that. Ballpark on a brand new granny flat, which costs about $250,000, you're looking at about $6,500 to $7,000 annual deduction. Why is that attractive? The reason why that is attractive is because of the returns you get in a granny flat. They're more likely to be cash flow positive. If they're cash flow positive, you're more likely to be in a tax payable position, which is a great situation to be because you're in fact actually making money. But with a new bill, when you've got Div 43 deductions, you could be in a position where you're cash flow positive but tax negative. Those to me are the best kind of investments you can make because one, you're getting this deduction, but on the flip side, you're physically getting the cash to fund and pay down debt. Can you claim depreciation on plant and equipment? The answer is yes, you can, as long as it's done within reason. I would like to quickly touch on a few key aspects that I'd like to cover. Sorry, could you go back? Oh, sorry, the next one, sorry, you're right. Yep. What about if you were physically living at your principal place of residence, you put a granny flat, and then you want to rent it out? What happens to your principal place of residence CGT exemption? I'm going to cover that topic in a second, but what I'd like to talk to you all before I do that is the premise of our tax law. The tax law in Australia, the premise is that we are a self-reporting nation. What that really means is the tax office says, these are the set of rules. As every taxpayer has to follow those rules. So you put your hand up and you say, based on these rules, this is my income, these are my deductions, and hence this is my tax. With the self-reporting system, the onus of proof lies with the taxpayer. What that really means is the tax office can come and say, we think you've made $1 million and you have to prove otherwise as the taxpayer. So when we go back to our tax law and when we look at what happens to certain concessions and what can we claim and what we can't claim, the onus of proof lies with the taxpayer. So you as a taxpayer have to demonstrate on how you've arrived at that deduction. Now, with the CGT exemption with regards to main residence is that as soon as you have a granny flat, And if you're physically living in that property and you build a granny flat and you lease it out to an arm's length tenant and you make money, then your CGT exemption is partially lost. Now, when we say it is lost is when you sell the property again, you have to prorata on what proportion of the value you receive is for that granny flat. And on that proportion, you're subject to capital gains tax. How do we arrive at that value? The tax office has been extremely helpful in not providing any guidance whatsoever. What that means is the onus of proof lies on you. As a taxpayer, you have to demonstrate of how you arrived at that value. And as long as that is reasonable, you tick the box. There are certain things to consider when you're thinking about a granny flat at the principal place of residence. But if it's an investment property, it doesn't really matter because the entire property is subject to capital gains tax and it is part of the capital gains tax regime anyway. There are certain primary tests that apply. That is, firstly, we talk about interest deductibility and the use test. What that means is that when can you deduct interest? When can you deduct depreciation? When does the clock start? And that is not when you started constructions, but when it was physically available for rent. There's the substance over form issues. What that means is that the tax office disregards any arrangement you might have, but considers what is, to a layman, what does this look like? That is more the essence of the arrangement rather than the actual arrangement with the tenant. And the last bit is anti-avoidance warning. What that says is that you can't have a mate as a tenant paying you $150 and claiming $400, $600 a week in deductions. Because the tax office views that that's an anti-avoidance provision. It's not at arm's length. So those are the bits that you got to be careful of. Don't do it. Get somebody else. Get your mate. Pay him $150 in beer. Get Mel to come and look at the property and rent it out for $700. You'll be far better off. That's about it, guys. That's something I've covered the tax. Now, how are you going to fund the project? Kayan's going to tell you about how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. My name is Gayan. I'm a finance broker, or for a more preferred term, a mortgage broker. So I'm here to talk about the finance aspect of it. So I guess just following through from all the speakers here. So those are essential items that actually falls through to the finance side of things. Let's look at the next slide on what options we have. So when it comes to financing for a granny flat, we do have a few options. But the first option there, which is a personal loan option, is probably the least preferred option. But of course, if you feel like that you do have sufficient funds from other sources, and then you need like a 50,000 or a 40,000 to be able to just complete it without having to go through all the rest of the loops that comes along with the finance side of things, then that would be a good option to go for. But as I said, it'll probably be the most least preferred option. Okay, so home equity option is a more preferred option, but it's not obviously considering the whole project in play here. All right, so that's to explain it a little bit more clearly. So let's just say you have a property and it's valued at $1 million as it is without the granny flat. All right, and then you got a loan of 600,000 on it. So the banks will consider up to a 80% loan to value ratio on a standard basis without charging a lender's mortgage insurance. So you easily have 200,000 equity that you can use without getting charged for LMI and so on, right? So you just go to the bank and say, look, I want to build a granny flat. However, I just want to use my equity. Right? I don't want to bring the whole plans, the approvals, the whole lot. Are you able to help? Yes, they can. As long as we have some sort of quotes support to, just support the expenses side of things, they'll be able to help you with that type of project. That's using the home equity. Very quick solution. as I said, the most preferred option. The next option is the absolute correct option to fund a granny flat, which is by obviously looking at a construction loan option. All right, so this is where we will probably talk through the next slides as to how that kind of works. All right, so how does a granny flat gets financed? Okay, so first thing is the bank will obviously once you get your council approvals, the whole lot done, which is the same standard practice as the other speakers kind of mentioned for the builders as well as the planning side of things. You need to have all that standard applications done in terms of approval. The council has to agree that you are allowed to put a granny flat in there. The banks will be concerned about this, so they will obviously have a look at that. And then the banks will do what's called a tentative on completion valuation, a TOC valuation. This is the same valuation that you would do if you were to build a house from scratch. So it's the same process. So the valuers will go and have a look at all the plans, approvals, and so on, and then just look at the builder's contract, and then they basically just do a TOC evaluation. Either they'll agree with the builder and say, "Yep, this is going to cost about 275,000," or they might just say, "No, this is not right. This is going to cost about 300,000 to build based on these plans and so on." So that's what the valuer's job. And then the bank will be obviously guided by an independent valuer. All right. So the insurance, again, this is just the building insurance side of things. These are all standard construction tools that the banks will be looking at just to make sure that you are compliant with all that. Impact on the property. Okay, so this is an important aspect on going through funding by adding value to your property, by adding the granny flat. I was just talking to Nick before. The only way you could actually have this included in a TOC evaluation is if you have the granny flat on the ground. So it actually has to have a concrete slab and it has to go on the ground. Any modular type or a prefab type of granny flats will not add value on a valuer's aspect of it, and the banks will not consider that as a part of the building addition. All right, you still can do it. It's cheap. Then you got to go to that second option of using your own equity and get a prefab, and off you go. All right. But if you want to actually look at using that increased value of the property, then it have to be on the ground with a slab. All right. So next slide. All right. So this is just selling my aspect of it. So why use a mortgage broker? Of course, I'm pretty sure most of you here would have either used a mortgage broker or spoken to one at some point. Of course, with this type of projects, especially with granny flat type of project, not every lender is in the market for this type of stuff. So there is some gray areas around this. It's not black and white as such. So we do need to workshop this type of transactions with the lenders. So what a mortgage broker would do is obviously you bring the case to us. You've already spoken to the builder. You got your planning approval and so on and stuff like that. And you say, okay, I've got all these sorted. I got to get the finance done now. All right. So what I would do then is obviously I speak to a panel of lenders and say, okay, this is the scenario. Who can help with this? So we have about 60 lenders. Not all of them obviously do construction, but there's a big panel. So sometimes if it's not a big four, there may be a small lender, a second tier lender who might just pick up and just say, look, we'd be happy to help with this. Standard 80% is fine. Because some banks might just say, oh, you're happy to do this, but it might be 70%. All right. So every bank has a different aspect as to how they look at it. So obviously we will work through your paperwork and so on and just see who is the best lender. And then, we'll pick the solution for you, come back to you and just say, this is the solution. This is where we're going to go. And then take it from there. I think the next slide is pretty similar to that as well. So with assessing finance side of things, is one thing that I did forget to put in there, is that with adding a granny flat, you can use your potential rent, so the future rent of that granny flat, into the servicing aspect of the loan. So that is additional income that we can ask the bank to use in support of your loan applications for that. So I think that's it. That's me. I will obviously hand over to David, I think. But just in terms of investment side of things, there are other scopes of investments that we can always look at as well. Granny Flat is a good one today. But if there's anything else you want to talk about as to how you can obviously look at other additional investments to build your income, always feel free to give us a call. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, well, look, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for coming. I'd like to say thank you to our speakers. I know it's hard when you get up here, but I thought it was a lot of value. You've given us a lot of information, and I hope that any of you that would like to get further information out can make direct contact with the guys and speak to them about it. And hopefully, if you're thinking about investing and you're thinking about any of our core areas, be it the Kalamunda District, be it Cannington, Armidale, Gosnells, the Belmont District in Vic Park, I hope I haven't forgotten any, but we cover all those Southeastern Corridor areas. You consider us. I think we've got excellent staff. We're very passionate, as you can see. We're honest. Not everything goes right all the time. And hopefully we stand up when things do go wrong, and we're always trying to learn. So thank you. If you'd help yourself to some refreshments, we pack up at 7:45. And if you'd like to mingle with any of the people, please take the time now to do so. Thank you very much, all of you. Well done.